Welcome to Life in the Bricks podcast, where we talk to real people about programs that enhance our community so that we can build bigger and better portfolios while providing options for our residents to achieve self-sufficiency. I'm your host, Tony McGinnis, Executive Director, CEO with the Huntsville Housing Authority. Man, welcome to Life in the Bricks podcast. I'm your host, Tony McGinnis. I have my co-host here, Fred McGinnis. We just talk to real people about real housing issues that affect our community. And I'm so excited to have an individual with us today who I'm sure is going to just enlighten us on some of the things that are happening, not only in housing, but across the country as it relates to public housing. I'm excited to also have him as a team member of the Huntsville Housing Authority's team as our real estate development director. And I'm going to actually also give him an opportunity to introduce himself and some of the other things that he's connected with before we get into the interview. So, Mr. AJ Smith, will you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, sir. First, Tony and Fred, thanks for having me. I appreciate it a lot. So I guess my story begins in 1997. I became the first Black certified appraiser in North Alabama. Since me, there still hasn't been, 26 years later, there hasn't been another Black certified appraiser. So that's where I really got my start. So after that, I started seeing where there were other voids in commercial real estate specifically. And then that's when I started working down the commercial real estate line. I received my CCIM, which is like analogous to a PhD in commercial real estate. Only 10% of active real estate agents have a CCIM. First brother in the state, one of the first in the region to have that. And from that, started getting into smaller development deals, and now I'm starting to work with larger development deals. The reason why I was attracted to the Huntsville Housing Authority is solely because of Tony McGinnis and his leadership. Having worked for myself for 26 plus years, it was a challenge for me working in an organization, but with Tony's leadership and his respect in the community, and I don't say that lightly, the way he cares for residents and cares for his people and the way he leads the organization, it's been easy for me to fall into that role to try to be his confidant or his left-hand man. We oftentimes joke, I'm his Kanye to him being Jay-Z. So, regardless of the beef that they may have currently, I try to be his right-hand guy with respect to making sure we're always advocating for the residents and we're trying to properly build a legacy for our tenure there. Oftentimes, you hear these rappers talking about buy back the block. We're going to do this in the block. But, these guys are also mixing up drugs, guns, and all this other stuff instead of talking about education, which I think Tony and I both have used as a way to get out the hood, right? And so it's been very important for me watching Tony grow as a leader and watching him do what he does. And it really does make me proud to be associated with the organization and be an advocate. So he has to talk me off the ledge sometimes because we see the social injustice that happens, right? So I think that's going to be some of what we talk about today. And as I told Tony, I was like, I hope we got the disclaimer up because people are going to have to understand that, these are our views and, not necessarily as we think about things from our official role with the Housing Authority. So well, thank you again, guys.
Man, we appreciate that. That was inspiring. Your check is in the mail. I know I paid you good money to say all those good things about me. So we definitely appreciate that. So we're going to get right into it, man. And we want to ask you just a couple of questions to kind of lead the discussion. But as we talk, definitely we can go into however direction we feel important. Fred, you
Before,
have something?
yeah, before you get into the questions, I gotta ask them because it seems like it's a pertinent question. AJ, why are you the only Black certified appraisal in North Alabama? And you did this in '97.
Yep.
You still don't have. Well, what is the cause for that?
Well, okay, it's simple. So that's a great question, Fred. First of all, I used to think it was not prejudice or bias or intentional in nature, right? So I heard your baby in the background, right? So what happens is there was a time prior to the housing meltdown where people had relationships with the appraisers, right? Mortgage lenders had direct contact with the appraisers, right? So when that happened, let's say, for instance, Redstone, which is one of the largest lenders in North Alabama. If you, Fred, have a relationship with Redstone and I come in, there are two things at play. You don't want to train your competition, right? Because one day I'm going to be your competition because it's an apprenticeship program. And secondly, your child is coming behind you. So it becomes a deal where it's generational because most of the people, if you look at in commercial real estate space or in the specialization of real estate appraisal work, it's Smith and Son. That's what I'm doing with my son right now. You know what I'm saying? My son's in school in undergrad, and he's focusing on business finance. So he can go straight into commercial real estate. So in a way, it's not intentional, but in a way, because we don't have people coming to Jemison, we don't have people coming to Columbia, we don't have people coming to our middle schools saying you should consider a career in commercial real estate, commercial valuation, or real estate appraisal work. Those things aren't opened up to us because that's not what it is. I mean, people don't even know, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to meet Rich Paul. And for those of you who know, that's LeBron James' agent. And that's what we talked about is entrepreneurship. So part of it is being able to step out on faith, having some entrepreneurial skills, understanding what that looks like, and also specializing inside of an area. So my goal has always been, because we talk candidly here, my goal has always been whatever you see a 40 to 45-year-old white guy doing, that's what you need to stop and ask him, what do you do for a living? Because oftentimes those guys have already cracked the code with how to make the most money and do the least amount of work based on their specialization, right?
Gotcha.
So when you ask me, I really backed into it because I went to Auburn and there was a guy who understood that there was a need for minority appraisers. Not everybody understands that need, even today. You see what I'm saying? Because you don't know, right? So it's not like it's a cost of entry. It's $1,500 to $2,000 to get your trainee's license. So unless you already have that relationship, no one's going to front end go pay for that, invest in themselves in that way, knowing that they may not get somebody to help them with their work. Help them get certified.
Gotcha.
So that's what I've seen. I mean, really.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that with us because, I mean, one of the things that we have to do is we got to put ourselves in spaces where we can be more visible in the real estate industry. And you've definitely done that. I want to talk today, of course, about housing and other issues. One of the things that before we even get started, we start talking about housing and affordability. We start talking about the need. You just finished a course a couple of months ago from Harvard, and you said something that I think is going to direct our conversation. You said that you learned there that for every one white collar worker you bring into a community, you need 5 blue collar workers to service them.
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, that's pretty straightforward. And I did go, thanks to you. I did go as a result of, just trying to better communicate and articulate to people and advocate for people as a result of the Housing Authority, my position there. And what we learned was as Tony mentioned, for every one white collar worker, you have to have 5 people to support. So that's why when you go to Popeyes now, that's why when you go to the cleaners now, that's why when you go to your favorite sit-down restaurant, they're short-staffed. I mean, we're not paying people enough, right? And in Huntsville, they love to tout, and it's admirable that we have 500 new white collar workers moving here a month. Well, okay. So that means for every month that we're bringing in 500 people, we need to be addressing the needs for 2,500 people, right? So one of the things that Tony and I did was he said, hey, man, we traded an article that was in AL.com because I believe, you need to, I'm very data driven and I think Tony is as well. So, we trade data and he gets data. One of the things he said it was, I believe, $15.19 to live in Huntsville. The average housing cost or rental rate was $15.19 a month, right? Well, that means we backed into it and we were able to determine that means you need to make $35 an hour to live in the city of Huntsville.
Huh.
So when you see jobs like Polaris or jobs like Mazda Toyota, who are advertising $20 to $25 a foot, $20 to $25 an hour, that still doesn't meet the need, right? So we have people that are cost burdened, right? And oftentimes what happens is people like to interchange, and I think it's code speak, affordable with workforce housing because it's more palatable to say workforce housing, right? So Tony, I throw this question back at you. How many of our residents are working versus non-working residents? What's the percentage you would say?
I'd say about 70% of our
But
residents are working, but
what's the public perception?
the public perception is that
Oh.
they don't work.
Yep.
And to your point, they're working, but when you look at the average income of our residents, it's about $15,000 a year,
Right.
which doesn't add up to $35 an hour at any rate. And so because our people are working, they're a part of that 5 number that we need to make sure that we're taking care of, because if we don't take care of that 5 number that you talk about, then those individuals are going to have to start moving to smaller areas outside of the city. And what's the benefit of me driving 20, 25 miles into Huntsville to work because I don't have a place to stay? So what I'm gonna end up doing is finding something closer to where I live, or not coming into the city at all, which is going to continue to lead to abandonment of some of these service jobs that we have throughout the city. So I think that's a very critical point that we got to start talking about. We just can't continue to have people move into the city and not take care of the folks who are the blue collar or service workers.
Well, and to your point, so let's make it real for the people that are out here listening. If our average resident makes $15,000 a year, again, I like to speak in things that you can go Google. HUD says no more than 30% of your annual income should go towards housing, right? So if we're saying they make $15,000 a year, that means $5,000 a year towards housing. Well, Tony, Fred, tell me where you can live, where you would want to live on $450 a month.
Right.
Somebody tell me where that's at. So the challenge is everybody likes to have the conversation around affordable or workforce housing at the 80% to 100 up to 120% AMI. No one wants to have the conversation with regard to 60 and below AMI. And that's what the frustration Tony and I have, although he's more polished with the way he expresses his frustration than I am, because there's not a real conversation being had about those people who are 60% or below. And by AMI, we mean average median income per census tract. No, I'm just saying it for the people out in the world that are listening. I know we three know, but when you start using acronyms, I just want to make sure that people can go look for themselves and understand. So when you start looking at a specific census tract and the average income is $50,000, well, you then have to take that and multiply that times 60%, which means $30,000 for a 60% AMI person, which means $10,000 a year for housing, which means $1,000 or $900 a month for housing. Tell me where you can live for $900 a month in Huntsville, Alabama.
Not many places at all. If any.
I'll wait. Where? You know what I'm saying? I'll challenge you to show me where you want to live, right? Because people who are working, they want the same things: good schools, access to services, access to food, access to entertainment activities. Where can you live? Crime free, right? Safety. They want to be safe. They want to be secure. They don't want to have to call their landlord every month. My water heater's out. Yeah. My air's out. They don't want to have to deal with that. They don't want to have to deal with absentee landlords who don't care. Where can you live? No one's having that conversation.
Man, that's some heavy stuff, man. Because once again, we talk about public housing, and we talk about some of those issues, but there's always something behind the scenes that nobody wants to address, and so that's why we have to have just conversations like this so that we can talk about those very situations. So which kind of leads to my next point is, explain, we need to talk about the concept of mixed income housing and the potential benefits for both residents and the communities. We're working on a project right now that's going to be mixed income. We'll have our choice neighborhood project that we're applying for. But when we think about mixed income, man, I just want to see what you all think about what that looks like. I know in Nashville, when you think mixed income, it's like a normal thing almost. But here in Huntsville, I don't know if we've really had any projects, but Fred, can you just kind of pinpoint some areas in Nashville that are truly mixed income and what that looks like for the Nashville community?
Absolutely. Well, they've done a really good job in Nashville of providing really decent housing for those that don't meet that plateau of what we're talking about in terms of the 35,000, let's say, and it would be 65, 70,000 in Nashville, right?
Right.
So if you think about that, there's only a certain percent of people in Nashville that make that type of money. So you're looking at a base, a demographic of about probably 40% that don't make that type of money. That's not in that middle class, right? So what they've done here is provided housing in the areas where it used to be a low income housing. They've built it up, and they've allowed certain residents to live in those houses. But also you have middle class people also living in those same housing. And some of this stuff can be income based. They don't want to really have too big of a discretion, but they do have many neighborhoods here where we have mixed housing in terms of income and in terms of the demographic from a low class, middle class. Of course, any high class demographic or person in that area wouldn't want to be in those houses anyway. So they're more of a suburb or just a highly saturated area where high income is prevalent. So Yeah, we have some places here in downtown Nashville. You have most of them are in downtown Nashville because as it goes. If you take the housing away in those areas, you got to send them somewhere, right? So they send them out to places like Antioch, which gives Antioch a bad look sometimes because everybody knows that anybody in low income housing is a terrible person. You know what I mean? And it's just not the case. So it just gives Antioch a bad blow and places like that. But they do have it, man. They do do a good job here. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people throughout the nation comes to Nashville and kind of see how they've done a good job of mixing that whole thing up.
So apparently it has to work, right? So we can't be afraid of mixed income housing, because here's the thing. And then one of the things that, I have to look at, and this is something that AJ and I talk about, but we can't discriminate, when you talk about mixed income housing, everybody's not going to get it at the very initial point, but you're going to have families who immediately get it and they realize, okay, everybody around me is up and they're working. I need to do something different. But if I don't get it immediately, then hopefully the goal is my children to get it. Then they will be productive. So we cut the generational cycle of poverty in half almost by creating incomes in communities where people are doing tremendously well because they are surrounded by growth and opportunity. And so, AJ, what do you think about mixed income communities and what the perception is, and how can we do better about just kind of removing some of the myths that everybody think when they talk about how this could work?
Well, I go back to the conversations we had, when we were interviewing developers, and the question that you asked each developer, which I thought was very, very wise. You asked and these mixed income developers, affordable housing developers, work all across the country. They're top 5 developers in the country. Tony asked them this question. When you mix incomes, or when you mix communities of public housing residents and market rate residents, where do most of the problems come from? And every one of them answered, from the market rate side. We don't have any problems from the public housing residents. The public housing residents are happy to be in the community. You see what I'm saying? Now, what people would say or automatically assume is, oh, the public housing residents are the ones that are causing the problems. That's not so. Based on what we heard back from the developers who do this in different parts of the country, the public housing residents are blessed or feel blessed to be there. One of the things that I would say is that has really been impressive to me that I did not understand was necessary. And Tony talks about this, and that is the trauma of living in public housing and the wraparound services that are necessary, right? So as we've developed this CNI project, the thing that really, really, really impresses me is not the bricks and sticks. I get that all day. You know what I'm saying? I see that every day in my practice. I get that. I understand what Class A apartments look like versus Class B, but it's the wraparound services and the commitment to the wraparound services where, Tony's a resident-centric kind of executive director. The commitment to wraparound services to make sure people have what they need. If you live inside the CNI footprint, that's been so powerful for me to see. You know what I'm saying? And it's also powerful for me to hear and other people to hear that it's not the public housing residents that are the problem in the mixed income communities. So I believe, because Nashville has to be more diverse than a city like Huntsville, even for that fact, Birmingham. When you have a more diverse community overall, then you have less pushback. One of the things I attribute that to is if I go to UAB I'm going to have to live around black folk.
Right.
If I go to Vanderbilt, I'm going to have to live around black folk.
Right.
I'm taking classes at Harvard and at Yale. You're going to have to live around black folk. So the younger generations are more open and receptive to understanding that they have to live in these mixed income communities, because oftentimes it's closer to the workforce, where they're working or where they're interning, doing their deal, than the older 60 plus demographic who have a preconceived idea of public housing, of who the residents are and what they're about, in my opinion.
Yeah, it just seems to me that those that have an issue with it have never done it, right?
Correct. Right.
So
right.
It's their kids and the people that they're raising that's doing it and have no issue with it. It's the people that's never done it, never been in that situation. So that's
right.
And I think that's the world we live in right now. So the young people are doing it and they don't have a problem with it. It's the people who are fearful that have never experienced it. And so I believe in it. What we're working on right now, I just believe it's the way to go, because you should have decent and affordable housing. Some of the housing that we have here, dates back to early 1952. And, people are still having to live that way. And so creating opportunities for individuals to have a decent place to live is very important. And so, AJ, one of the questions I also want to ask, man, what do you see as some of the key challenges facing public housing here in our city, and really with your experience throughout the country, man? What are some of the things that you see?
Okay, so here's what's really interesting about public housing, right? Now it's about to get real. Before your tenure at the Huntsville Housing Authority, I believe that people didn't necessarily have their eye on the ball, because if you look across the country with public housing, let's back out. We're going to in fact, just strike that whole start. We're going to back out to public housing on a macro level. Most of the public housing sites across the country were once sites that never had any value, right? Now, what's happened is these sites are often in an urban core, right? Now we need them.
Yep.
What are we going to do, right? And predicated on the local government would make a decision, because let's be clear, the local government is very much although housing authorities are autonomous from city government, though people don't understand that. That's one misconception that people have. They think we report to the mayor. We don't.
Right.
No one does. It's a federal agency, so no one really understands that. So if you're able to put people in positions that are going to advance the city of the agenda before the residents that they are sworn to represent, guess what happens? Reconcentration of poverty in places like Antioch, farther away from services, where you're talking about now public housing residents have to come work back into the city of Nashville, which I'm very intimate with, and they have to take a bus for 45 minutes one way, or an hour and a half one way, just to get to work. So when you talk about the future of public housing, you have to start with how people were displaced and how there were no programs for those people who were displaced. Because even in regards to Huntsville, when any effort has been made to deconcentrate, not reconcentrate, deconcentrate poverty, you get some, I get some, we get some, we move it, then that's always been met with resistance. As long as we are reconcentrating poverty in areas that are primarily African-American, then that doesn't follow with so much pushback. But we've gotten so much pushback as a result of trying to deconcentrate poverty that it has been a challenge So much so now that there's legislation on a book from a former state legislator. We can't even purchase property without giving formal notice to everyone around. Mike Ball passed some legislation after Stone Manor that the Huntsville Housing Authority, even if somebody came to us today, Fred, and said, we want to sell you 200 units in the city of Madison. We believe in your mission for $10. We're going to sell these 200 units for you for $10. We can't purchase them because of what's happening right now, because of that law that was passed that stated Huntsville Housing Authority has got to let people know.
Wow.
How do you overcome that? Right?
So the government just regulates the moves that the housing authority can make. Just to
even being an autonomous agency.
Right. Even being a federal agency. Exactly.
Right.
That's man, that's a heavy conversation. But you know, it really rolls right into my next question about what role does government policy play in shaping public housing initiatives? And are there any changes or reforms that need to be made? You know, because here we are, an agency who takes care of people. And I ask people this question all the time. Take away the housing authority. What role does city play in taking care of those people who are at 30-40% AMI? Just take away public housing. You still have a population of people who need a place to go. So what role do we play in shaping those initiatives as a government?
Well, I mean, we were at that United Way housing, collaboration 4 or 5 months ago. And the question I started with, Fred, was this: who in here believes that Huntsville Housing Authority is responsible for affordable housing? How many people you think raise their hand? Over 80%.
What?
Yeah, because they think that that's our mission.
Right.
So people aren't educated, and you know what? To be fair, maybe some of that's on us as a housing authority, but a lot of it's on the community.
Right.
Because that message doesn't get out. No, listen, man, we're so busy recruiting jobs that we don't care about how we fill them. We don't care about where these people live. You know what the mantra will be: the market will make a decision.
Right.
Yesterday we were on a call and we found out that affordable housing price per door is equal to or greater than the construction of Class A. Now,
Wow.
You heard what I just said?
Yes.
So when you talk about how can the government get involved, the government has to make a concerted effort to say, we are going to take care of those with less, right? We're going to take care of the least of this society, right? That are actually trying to work their way out. Well, here's the problem with that. If we aren't at the table advocating for that as a people, the public housing residents and others, the affordable housing residents, if they don't see us as part of their constituency, game over.
Right.
Don't even have an opportunity. The only thing that politicians and government understands is where do the votes come from?
Who they serve.
Who they serve. And even though, and I'll say it here, the councilman for the CNI project has not been to one meeting. Not one. Right? And I'm saying, hey, man, this is your constituency. He said, but they don't vote.
So why
said, but you're supposed to represent all the people in your district, right? But they don't vote. So we, as people of color, have got to take a local election far more serious than we do a federal election. because the local election affects, if your son gets pulled over for DUI, we may know the attorney, we may know the judge, but on a federal case, we don't know anybody.
Right.
I mean, we're not going to be able, you can't call Joe Biden. He has a meeting every week with Tommy Battle. You see what I'm saying? So we have more of an impact on a local level. So understanding that, and understanding residents understand that, understanding people who are most affected about the housing crisis, that's what we have to do. We have to arm people with the information so that they can then in turn put pressure on people who are elected to office.
There you go.
And you know, you said that most or some of these, you know, leaders think that our folks don't vote, but you know, we can challenge that as well, because we can influence
Correct.
some decisions that are being made as far as leadership as well. And I think, you know, we as an agency can't do that, but as community leaders, you know, we can get out and start educating our residents and just people who hang around those communities on, man, the importance of going out there and getting your voice heard through elections. And, you know, one of my last questions is, man, you know, we talk about the government, but we also got to look at how does public housing intersect with issues of racial, economic inequality, man, and what steps need to be taken to address those disparities. Because when you think about the economic impact of what we bring to the table, even as a housing authority, you know, people don't necessarily understand, man. We turn on a lot of lights. You know, a lot of people are getting fed through some of the things that we do. And you know, everybody doesn't understand how having folks who have to pay utilities and folks who go to grocery stores and folks who add to the community, how that impacts Huntsville as a whole. And you know, what I want to do, you know, spend a few minutes talking about that and the economic impact of housing and how we need to dispel some of those disparities, because man, our people make a economic impact on this community that most people don't necessarily understand. You know, the folks who work, you know, they pay their employment taxes. The folks who pay their utility bills, the grocery stores and the stores, and the money that we spend in our communities, man. But
Car
people
dealerships.
don't necessarily want to talk about that.
Right. Car dealerships. We keep them going. We keep our kids clothes. So we help our department stores. I mean, it's just so much. I mean, it's regular citizen stuff that we just don't get credit for, right? Crazy. To me, I've just been a product of the inner city, been a product of housing. I mean, I think everybody that I knew, the parents of that person worked. They got up in the morning. You could hear the cars turning on, you know, early in the morning when it's cold, to let their car warm up. And they were going to work. Get us ready for school. We go to school, they go to work. So it's not like I mean, it's just a huge misconception to think that everybody in public housing does not lend a hand in doing what we're supposed to be doing in the community. It really hurts because it just doesn't give you a fair chance either, because no one's going to believe that you can do this if they have this misconception about what it's all about. So that's why I love what you guys are doing, fighting for people, making sure, AJ, you being a firecracker and making sure that things are being said. Tony, you doing what you're doing. You're a product of that community, and just giving back and answering phone calls late at night and just doing what you're supposed to do. You're like, when you took that position, I told you, you're not a politician, you're an activist in that role, and you continue to do that. You know what I mean? And that's what it's about.
Man, and Fred, you couldn't have said it better. But I'm gonna go one step further and say he's a blessing. We're blessed to have him. You know what I'm saying? And I know he's doing it from the right place with his heart. And I know this isn't Tony's show, but for me, I tell everyone he's a good dude. It's not a lot of guys that I would follow. And
Right.
I know his heart is in the right place. You know, so
right.
You know, he has to turn my volume down sometimes, and I accept it and appreciate it. You know how your brother can be.
Right.
But he does give me the latitude to say the things that need to be said. And this is something that needs to be said, even with respect to us spending money. I would rather us not spend money and vote.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? That's the part that we have got to get people to understand. As I oftentimes say, even in Huntsville, District 1, which is, you know, where Devin Keith is, we can't single-handedly vote for mayor, but we can determine who the next mayor is.
There you go.
You see what I'm saying? When we come together as a community and really use our voice, and I think that's one of Tony's real strong suits, is he is an activist.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
But he's not political.
Right.
He don't like to play that game.
No.
So you gotta have somebody that likes to play that game.
Right.
And I like to play the radio.
There you
So
go.
I'm you know, that's what I do.
Right.
And some people, people care for me and people don't. That's okay.
Hey.
But as long as my guy is okay with me, I'm gonna keep on doing what I'm supposed to do in this role. As long as I have his confidence, I'm cool. I really believe, though, that's where it really starts. We got to keep people educated, because we're not going to change the mind of the 60-year-old person who has a preconceived idea
Not happening.
of what it is. We're not going to change them. You know, Tony and I have been talking recently about, hey, man, our new life philosophy is somewhat focus on your strength and discard your weakness, or delegate your weakness to someone else. And that's what I've started to do. And I think that's what Tony has as well. You know, just focusing really on your strength and making that work for you, and just setting your weakness aside, because so many times we try to take our weakness and improve on that. No, you discard that.
Right.
You know, not discard it totally, but delegate it.
Right.
If you know it's something that you're not good at, give it to somebody else, because so that way you can serve your greater purpose.
Right.
And I think Tony's doing a great job of serving his greater purpose. So I appreciate being on the show today, guys. And I appreciate being able to be heard. So I really do. So thank you so much for having me.
This is my last question. You know, looking ahead, what do you see as the future of public housing, and what roles can individuals and communities and policy makers play in shaping the future of public housing?
All right. So as you know, Tony, HUD is making a strong push to get away from property ownership. So that's going to look like vouchers. What it's going to become in the future is a voucher-based system, right? Fred, here's your voucher. You figure it out.
Right.
Right? Tony, here's your voucher. You figure it out. We'll still have some units that we control at all times, I think. But as we move forward, HUD's not going to be in a position of really building truly public housing anymore, right? So to me, our goal as an agency and as a culture is making sure we're preparing our people to use the vouchers, to go places where their vouchers are accepted. Because see, here's what I love. Here's the irony in all this. Huntsville right now has a glut right now of multifamily coming on the market. We got a surplus, 8-year surplus. A year and a half ago, we would try to have conversations with Class A market guys about taking our vouchers. Nah, we're good. We're good. Well, that conversation has shifted now that we have the surplus.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Mm.
So we have the leverage that we haven't always had, right? So some of that is changing, and what they're learning about our residents have to have the same requirements as any other resident that they have. So they don't understand that. So people don't understand, and they don't understand. We're not saying you got a 300 credit score, you get to move into the Ritz-Carlton. We're not saying that. We're not asking you to make any exceptions for them as prospective tenants. We're saying give them an opportunity, and as such, we're going to subsidize whatever their rents are.
Right.
So it's, again, I think, to go back to your question, Tony, I think it's about educating people. I think it's engagement on our part. And I think it's also about, it's educating the landlords, but it's also educating our residents. because our residents sometime, and I love the way Tony holds our residents accountable. Our residents walk in because of the trauma of public housing, expecting things to be a certain way, and that's not what they're greeted with. And they say, "Oh, you're picking on me because I'm a public." No, we're picking on you because you ain't cleaning up your joint. You ain't cleaning up. You got people coming and going, and you doing things that you used to do that you can no longer do. Right. So I think everybody needs to come together and become more educated. I think the greater divide of the country in general, I think over 60% of Americans are cost burdened. That means that they're spending more than 30% of their income on their housing. I think that is going to be something that crosses racial lines, that crosses demographic lines, having that conversation. And I also think that they're going to have to be new construction techniques, new zoning requirements. And also we're going to have those wraparound services that I now love. You got to have services for people because, Fred, me and you tomorrow could get accepted to Harvard Medical School.
Right.
But what we going to do when we get there? Right?
Right.
What we going to do? What we going to do? We there?
Right.
Well, what we going to do? We going to need some help, right?
Absolutely.
And then and to go further with that analogy, you then can't say as Harvard Medical School, see, we gave these guys a shot and they ain't make it.
Right.
No, you didn't give them a shot. Right?
Resources.
Right. You got to have resources. And that's one of the things that Tony really advocates for. So to go back to your question, Tony, I think it's education on both sides. I think it on three sides: the governmental agencies, the residents, and the landlords, and also making sure that we're providing resources moving forward, making sure that those resources are there for people.
Continued education for our tenants.
Yep.
For our people, continue education. Yep. Everything needs to be a continuation of getting better.
Yep.
Because once you get complacent, you would drop the ball.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And to that, and Fred, off that, I would say making sure we're doing a good job of disseminating information to people.
And following
up. You know what
I'm
saying? Because sometimes Tony and I know things that only Tony and I know that everybody should know.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? We should be able to get that information out. Like, when he commissioned me to, hey man, look at this housing study. And we figured out it was $35 an hour to live in Huntsville. That's all you need to say.
Right.
Then everybody else can go from there. I mean, you can make your own conclusion from there.
Right.
And there it is, man. It's a lot of work that has to be done. But I think as long as we continue to have these kind of conversations, man, we'll educate the public, we'll educate the community, and we'll be able to start to shape the future of public housing and the future of our residents, man. I'm excited about the show today. If you're a listener, just kind of look for this on all our social media platforms. We thank you guys for just kind of being here today. AJ, we thank you for spending some time with us.
Yes, sir.
And definitely be on the lookout for this episode on all your social media links. We appreciate our producer behind the scenes making this all come together. So, man, we just appreciate everybody who puts in work to make this happen. Join us again next time on Life in the Bricks podcast. This has been great, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome job, guys.
We've come to the end of the podcast today. Please share the link on all your social media platforms. We hope that you all will join us again next time. Until then, keep serving and keep pushing. This has been another amazing episode of Life in the Bricks podcast. Peace.